at this. Woo! I'm going to wait a few minutes. Let me see. I need to get on here to see who's on. Y'all. Wait a few minutes. Tonight should be an interesting night. I always have something for you. As my husband says, the show must go on. I'm Dr. Tori J. I'm the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. Still in quarantine. Florida will open up, I think I heard, on Monday. So they will start phasing us into it. Child, look, I got to get to Atlanta because this Maine right here is tired. But I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys tonight, simply because we were supposed to have Miss Margot on tonight, who is the social worker. However, she's not able to come on tonight. She postponed it until the following week. So let me kind of give you some lineup and some I guess some people who are coming on eventually. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's kind of cool. I have the closed caption is on. You guys, even though you can't hear me, you can read it. That's cool. Okay, so everybody check in. Tell me who's on. Let me know how your week is going. It is Healing Tuesday. And tonight we are still on the subject of fatherless and sexual abuse. And as we're on this, we're going to talk about men. Men need to be heard too, is the title of tonight. As much as I would love to have a man on, we talked about this last week. Men don't always, right? They don't always share their perspective. They don't always share their journey. But my husband and I came up with a way to share it. So I hope it will be insightful. I hope it will really draw you in and give you what it is you need. As we are having this conversation, let me recap on some of the things that we've talked about. We've shared my story, which gave you the courage to share your own story, which really opened up the idea and gave us the information that many of us had forgiven our attacker, but hadn't forgiven our parents, right? So we have that moment. Then we talked about sexual abuse in the Bible. And in the midst of talking about sexual abuse in the Bible, we saw that God had a no holds bar position concerning sexual assault, sexual trauma, as we're going to call it. Because that kind of, I don't have to just keep saying sexual abuse and sexual assault. Because they are, to me, two different things, but sexual trauma encompasses everything. I will say to you guys tonight, last week was amazing. It really confirmed and reaffirmed some of the positions we had. It gave us tools. I'm grateful that therapist, professor, he's a lot of things. He came on and counselor, he came on and gave us that insight, which was an awesome thing. Hey, Becca, nice to see you. Sorry we missed you last week too, because there was so much good stuff on there, especially for you, because I did ask one of your questions. So hopefully you got to go back and listen to it, or you will get to go back and listen to it. We had the therapist on. I told you guys I'm not fully opening this can until we have some people on. But as he got on and it was confirming, look at my husband, babe. You're commenting from the iPad, I think, and therefore he's commenting as the Fatherless Generation Foundation, which isn't a bad tool, love, when it comes down to some of the other stuff we're going to do. Hey, Dwayne, it's good to have you both on here. Even sharing with Matthew Volker, who was the therapist on last week, and letting him know that we had couples on. He was like, that's amazing. And I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it is amazing. It's amazing that you guys have come on here, saw value, invited your spouse or your partner, and or maybe your soon-to-be spouse. And it was an opportunity. It's been an opportunity for you guys to get some of the tools and some of the things you need to heal your relationship before you proceed into marriage, or even while you're married. That, I hadn't thought about it like that, but therapist Matthew and I got on the call afterwards and really discussed it. And I'm honored. I can't lie to you guys. I'm super honored. Let me make sure I say, my husband did put it on here. Share, share, share. Share this. We're going to watch some YouTube videos tonight. I'm not going to lie to you. That's where we're going, because I can't tell you I can find a man who would be willing necessarily to come on here and fully expose his journey of sexual abuse. But there were, when we got the postponement, we were like, what are we going to do? And I kept hearing men, we got to talk about the men, because that was one of the places we left off last week. I didn't go super duper into it, but we did discuss men have their thing. They have their moments when it comes down to, when it comes to this whole ideology and this whole situation. I'm sorry, my shirt is weird and it's supposed to go off my shoulder. And so I got to pull it out because otherwise it looks crazy. That men aren't supposed to talk about this. And men, when you go through sexual abuse, you're not supposed to share that because you got to man up and you don't share your emotions. And all of this stuff is being forced on men, and they're not able to be honest about their sexual assault. So tonight we're going to watch some YouTube videos that I think will be impactful for you. I know you haven't probably seen these. And so it'll give us some context, and it'll give it to you from a male's perspective, and then we can dialogue. We're gonna watch the first one we're gonna watch where a young man was sexually abused as a kid. He was raped by a family friend, and they both have different contexts, and that's why I have to share both of them, and they're only like 15 minutes long. One's 14, I think one's 16, something like that. So it'll only take up 30 minutes of what we're gonna do here. But I needed to do this because we have to have the male conversation in this. And Vara kept saying, we need to have someone come on and talk about theirs other than you. And as much as I wanted to do that, I don't have anybody who's going to be that in depth and that honest about their sexual assault. So the next best thing was to say, I'm going to share my screen. Are you guys okay with that? Tell me how you feel about that. Tell me, are you cool with that? Give me a thumbs up if you're like, let's do it. Let's figure out, let's hear this. Give me a thumbs down if you're like, I don't know about that, Dr. Tori J. I'm waiting to see. And also chime in and tell me how you guys are feeling, how things are. Okay, I saw one thumbs up. I saw one go by. Okay, Nydia says, yes, I'm okay with it. Okay. All right, so we're gonna, and I've never shared a screen with anybody before, not on this platform. It says push to staging. Okay, I like this. Okay, I get some thumbs. I see the thumbs up. So just remember, we're gonna dialogue about this afterwards, and then we're gonna go into the next one, because I think they both have different perspectives in some way, but then they all seem to summarize up to the thing that even women talk about. We have to, I think when we're talking about things like this, we leave men out. And there's no way, being the Fatherless Generation Foundation, I'm going to leave the men out. Nydia, you got me chuckling. She says, I'm like full flat tires, full flats over here. I'm always down. I love it. I can't wait for us to have like a meetup somewhere. How many of you, can we have this conversation really quickly before I hit this button? How many of you are willing to like plan a meetup somewhere, and like we go and we hang out somewhere? Because I know we're in all different parts of the country. How many of you are like, yeah, give me a one if you're like, yeah, I would definitely do a meetup, hang out, dinner, retreat weekend. Give me a one for that. Give me a two if you're like, I ain't going nowhere. I want to see where you guys are, because I love you guys like I know you. Becca said, I'm down. And I would get to meet everybody on this Healing Tuesday Facebook Live. I love the closed caption. Okay. Oh, Nydia and Dwayne and Becca. So we got a couple. We got a single person. Nydia, see, I got some things are going around in my head. Okay, so let me go ahead and put this on here. I'm going to put him at the top so that you guys can watch this video, right? So let's go ahead and get into this video. Hopefully you can hear it. Can you hear it? One, if you can hear it. Two, if you can't hear
it. A few years ago, my grandfather died. He was an important figure in my life. He was someone who I looked up to. He was, in my mind, the ideal man. He was an immigrant farmer who built a house where he raised 7 kids, 5 boys and 2 girls. My dad also had 7 kids, 5 boys and 2 girls. I can remember very vividly something my grandfather would say to us as we were growing up. If we got upset or we complained about something, he'd say, "Are you a man or a mouse?" I can hear the tone of his voice in my mind, and I can see the half-serious, half-joking face he'd make when he'd say it. But I can also remember how I felt. A little upset, a little confused, with just a hint of shame for not being manly enough. But I was just a kid. How could I understand this old man's wisdom? Was this some kind of Ukrainian fable or riddle? Obviously, I'm not a mouse, so I must be a man. And coming from a family with so many men, this wasn't the only half-true, half-serious one-liner we were told. We heard lots of this kind of wisdom, every time for a different occasion. I had an uncle who would jokingly say, "See my finger, see my thumb, see my fist, you better run." In every community, there exists an idea of who we are supposed to be. And in my southern Ontario rural community, we picked tobacco, we played hockey, we filled the pews at the local church. And we were tough. We were Shelleys. To answer my grandfather's question, we were men, not mice. Our environment, our family, our community, they shape us. They offer us an identity, or at least a narrative that we're to follow, even at an early age. Before a child is 5, they will have a fairly concrete understanding of who they are, with the broad strokes of identity starting to be formed. Life, however, has a way of challenging and confronting those family and community narratives that we grow up in. For me, this became present in the form of sexual abuse. Right at the beginning of my adolescence, a friend of the family took me into the basement of our home and raped me. This would continue over the course of that summer. And in those first few moments, my understanding of the world changed. My ideas about who I was, where I was from, the community that I grew up in, they were all changed. And my abuser also began to offer me a new set of one-liners, a new narrative to follow. He'd say things like, "This is all your fault," or "I thought you wanted this," and "No one's ever going to believe you." What I had believed about myself didn't match the experience that I was presented with. To make matters worse, I'd never heard of a boy being sexually assaulted. You see, strangers were the ones who hurt kids, and they're supposed to be driving sketchy vans and wearing ski masks, not my older brother's friend. My understanding, which came from books like Berenstain Bears and Company, was that bad guys look bad, and they're supposed to try and get you to steal something for them. But boys are tough, especially Shelley boys. We weren't supposed to be the victims. Real men are strong. Real men don't get raped. When something doesn't exist in your mind, or when the possibility of it even happening isn't even a thought, who are you supposed to tell? This wasn't the bad guy that I was prepared for. This wasn't the life that I was supposed to be living. Are you a man or a mouse? It echoed in my mind. I'm not even really sure I knew what that meant. You see, I believed that I was a man. At least that's how I thought the world needed to see me. But I felt like a mouse, maybe even less than a mouse. I had no idea what was happening to me or how to even rationalize it. And this confusion took me into some dark and terrible places in my mind. My early teen years were filled with suppressed emotion and with anger. I had no idea who I was. All I wanted was to be able to share my experience, what was happening to me, with someone. But I remember at about age 14, having a female relative reveal that she too had been sexually abused. The response, the attitude, the posture towards her, the community had just decided she was a mouse. And as someone who had never told anybody about their own experience of abuse, the thing I remember the most were the things that people were saying about her. Things like, she'll never have a normal relationship. She'll be messed up forever. And what a shame, her future's gone. Without ever being given a chance to counter it, a narrative was forced on her. Ideas that I was believing and accepting myself, all the while still believing that real men are strong. Real men can't get raped. But the reality is that sexual violence against males is not uncommon. The current stats reflect that about 1 in 6 males will experience some form of sexual violence at some point in their life. And the actual number might be very different given the stigma behind reporting sexual violence. A stigma, a narrative, a misconception. And so I see in my own experience a reflection of a greater issue in our society. Narratives. Broad, sweeping narratives replacing our own individual stories, replacing our identities. There's a pressure to accept what our community says is true about us. The family we come from, the place where we grow up. And when we give in to that pressure, we rob from our communities the ability to listen to one another, primarily because we ourselves don't know how to share our stories. As a young man, in failing to share what happened to me, I lost the very idea of me. I was feeling the pressure to be a man, to not be a victim, to not acknowledge my pain and my grief. Worse, I was unable to ask myself the 2 most important questions for any young person. Who am I? Who do I want to become? What had happened to me was who I was becoming. I was believing what my abuser said about me, that somehow this was my fault. I was believing what I heard about other victims of abuse, that I too had no future. And even though they didn't mean to do it, I was believing what my community told me was true about me, that there was no other way, Seth. Be a man. Be a man. You aren't allowed to be a mouse. And this is the opposite of what happens in storytelling. In storytelling, we are the narrator. We're not the characters just placed in someone else's narrative. The earliest human artifacts we have are stories, oral tradition, language itself, paintings, religious and philosophical myths from across every civilization. They're stories that are embedded into their communities through individuals. The core of any culture is storytelling, honest storytelling. And losing the ability to share in our own unique experiences, in our own unique languages and understandings, is the slow death of any community. I grew tired of being told who I was, of who I was destined to become, of feeling this pressure to not embrace and acknowledge my pain. Call it foresight, call it divine intervention, whatever it was. I decided that I needed to take control of my life, and I discovered that in sharing my story. Working with youth, I have seen firsthand the powerful misconceptions that surround young people, especially young people that grow up with fewer privileges. So often, their identity is simply replaced with their context. Some misconceptions come from the family or community that we grow up in. Some misconceptions come from someone who wishes us harm. Some misconceptions come from someone trying to sell us a product, much like young women believing they need whatever that product is in order to be thin and have self-worth. But misconceptions steal from our stories and they rob from our identities. Indigenous Canadians have so many stories to tell. And they have the first-hand experience of the devastation that is felt by a community when those stories are silenced. Entire communities losing their culture, their tradition, their stories. It's a profound and devastating example of applying a singular identity to a diverse group of individuals. For me, there was no healing without sharing. Learning who I truly was discovered in telling my story. And we exist here today as parts of a community. And a community is made up of individuals. And when we replace just one unique individual experience with someone else's narrative, we lose a part of our community. And as a part of this community, I want to recognize the importance of listening to Indigenous people's stories. Being white and never experiencing it myself makes it all the more important to listen and to hear. Because our stories are important, not just for the person sharing, but also for the person listening. When we listen to stories of abuse, of pain, and of grief in our community, we are acknowledging that it happened. We are acknowledging that it's not okay. And we apply value to the individual and the importance of who they are. We open the door for a deeper level of connection, and we open the door for healing. By sharing my story and experience of rape, I hope to regain part of my identity, to not allow what happened to me to define me. When I share my story, I include you as part of my community. And there are times that I share, and there are lies and misconceptions that are confronted in the act of sharing, and it reminds me of the truth of the situation. Even now, in this very moment. So my challenge is that we share and we shake off those narratives that we feel pressured to accept and adopt, and we write our own unique stories. And as we share, we become better listeners, and we allow those in our community to have a voice. I believe to create healthy communities, we need to be healthy people. And we need to provide safe places. Places where we can share, where we can listen. Places where we can embrace our identities, not simply based on circumstance. And so I wish I had the chance to sit down with my grandfather one more time, because I would love to hear him ask me again, "Are you a man or a mouse?" And instead of allowing those childhood feelings to take over, I would just love to tell him my story. And I'd love to ask him about his own. And as we share and listen to one another, we might see past our ideas and the misconceptions we have of one another and see each other just a little more clearly. So my challenge is not to look at each other and ask things like, "Are you a man or a mouse?" But rather, what's your story? And watch and see how it changes your value, your engagement, and your perspective in your community. Thank you.
All right, you guys. So there's some major nuggets in here, and I want to see what you guys got from it, because I got a lot. I'm going to start talking a little bit about what I got, but I want you guys to chime in and just really pour into the comments what you got from this. How did it make you feel hearing this man even have this conversation about having this sexual abuse happen to him by his brother's friend, who was a female, as he was growing up? So one of the things I picked up on was, are you a man or are you a mouse, right? Oh, all the nice loud cars that love to drive. You wouldn't believe how high up we are, and you can still hear that. But are you a man or are you a mouse? And last week, one of the conversations that we had surrounding men is, you're told to man up. You're told to suck it up. Men don't cry. Men don't this and that. And you're shit. I think it's interesting to hear the comments, especially last week, and hear this young man share his story, it seems like men are told more about what men don't do than what men actually do. Can I get somebody to tell me yay or nay on that one? Because that's my perspective. That's what I'm hearing. I'm not a man, but when we're talking about men in this context, that's what it seems to, that's what I always seem to hear. What men don't do. Men don't cry. Men don't show emotion. Men don't do this. Men don't do that. Are you a man or are you a mouse? Well, clearly you're going to choose, I'm a man. And what appears to be manly is stuffing all this stuff down. And so it's hard to get men to share these things. I'm looking for somebody to chime in on what you got. Was that inspirational to you? Did it have no value? Did you not get it? I need somebody to help me here. Come on. The other thing is he talked about how our environment, our family, and our community shape our identity. I can honestly tell you that's a lot about what we talk about. It's a lot about what we share on Healing Tuesdays. What's shaping our identity? What's shaping our narrative? He brought narrative up a lot, and I love that word. I do. I love the word narrative because we're talking about oral presentations. We're talking about, the Bible is an oral presentation of a family history. But what if no one ever shared that story? What if people were embarrassed to share some of those stories, and so we never heard them? What then? The other thing I wanted to know, because narratives is clearly the third thing on my list here, because I love that word, especially how he used it. What narrative did you tell yourself, or have you been telling yourself after you were sexually traumatized? What was the narrative? Was it your fault? Did you feel guilt? Did you blame yourself? Did you feel shame? Because there are people who do these things and they groom you, and they have a way of making you feel threatened. They have a way of making you feel like, if you tell anyone, I'm going to kill your entire family. He even talked about, the belief that we shared last week, that strangers are the ones who sexually assault us. Can we kill that narrative? They don't show up in the crazy white van and pull up on you. They don't. There's someone Nydia said, let me see if this will let me show. Oh, it lets me show it this week. Last week it didn't. I saw Becca say, I agree. Nydia said, I applaud his courage to step out of the darkness and share his story. That takes courage. Unfortunately, too many young men still have that stigma. I see it all too much as a victim advocate. Yeah, that's why we're sitting here watching TED Talks, because I'm like, I know some people, but I don't think they're going to share that story. I'm pretty sure they're not. And if they do, they're going to share it so fast, Healing Tuesday would be 5 seconds long. Yeah, it happened. They're not going to give you some of the details that this young man really poured out. The other thing that he talked about, the belief of yourself not matching the view that you had of yourself. Like, what happened to you changed what you really thought you were. Like, it changed who you believed yourself to be. That was tough to hear, because I think I've heard many of you say things like that. And I've heard individuals in groups say the same thing. Becca's narrative was, it was my fault. I felt shame, dirty, and worthless. And I felt like nobody listened, so I was overreacting. Even when I think about you and Nydia, Becca, when you're on here talking, and Nydia's mom told her she imagined it, and your mother said it didn't happen. Like, how many people have that moment in that journey? And he talked about it. He talks about, his 14-year-old cousin, or he was 14, and his cousin sharing that it happened to her. And they immediately slapped a label on this girl. Oh, she's a mouse. And they slapped the label, she's going to have trouble in her relationship. She's going to have all of this stuff. So then it keeps you silent. It keeps you quiet. And it keeps you in a position where you choose not to say anything. If you're being told you imagine something, now, am I cuckoo for Cocoa Pops? You're being told that, nope, it didn't happen. I don't believe you. But it happened. In your mind, reading this book online, I'm reading several books at the same time. I'm trying to do a chapter a day in each book. Crazy. I could just read one, but I get bored. My brain is all over the place these days. Y'all hear him over here? Mm-hmm. He's been quiet, Nydia, because he was eating. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you, The issue is in the tissues. That book right there. Your body knows. It's how we get back into the migraines that I heard in my spirit when we were talking that one day. And not only going back to Candace, but also my friend Maya, and recognizing, oh my God, she has crazy migraines. And I haven't talked to her about it since I shared that with her. But your body knows. Your body remembers. I think there's another book that's called something like Your Body Remembers or something. There's no way you can keep telling someone they imagined it or it didn't happen to them. Their body knows. Let me see. Nydia says, makes you question everything you think, every decision I make, and everything and anything someone tells me. See, it has you in a place where you don't even trust your instincts. You don't even trust yourself because you don't even know who you are. And that's something, Nydia, that I want to help you work through in that way, because that's a crazy place. My mother admitted to something, you guys, a week or two ago, that she's been lying about for 20 years, you guys. And it freed me in a way. Like, it was just like, but this is my issue with these things. They always tell you in secret, but the moment was an open shame, right? You were put to shame openly and groups of people knew. But now you get a text message or an inbox or, you know what I'm saying, or a phone conversation, and it never really gets you what you want. One of the things that he talked about, because I want to go to the next video really quickly, he said, there's no healing without sharing. Can we get an amen, somebody? Yeah. I want to know who you guys are telling your story to, because people need to hear your story. That's really the purpose of this particular Healing Tuesday. Not just this one, but the whole series. Eventually, the goal is someone needs to hear your story. And I'll tell you the next 2 weeks, the lineup that we have for the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to move on. We stayed on this one a little longer than I thought we would. Becca said, and having your younger sister reinforce those lies just made me feel like I was too sensitive, too negative, and a storyteller in the wrong way. Yeah, a liar, basically, right? You are a storyteller, Becca, but it's not the way that they tried to make you sound. Becca said, yes, I doubt myself. I doubt myself so much. Whoops. She said, Nydia said, like, I know I'm a badass woman in a positive way, but sometimes I fall into the dark place of questioning all of it. Well, I see you work out on Instagram, and I'm jealous, and you definitely badass. Okay, let's be clear. y'all see Nydia on Instagram, you're like, I am a slacker. Yes, I am. Nydia has this thing down. You hear me? But I need you guys to know that it's those dark moments, it's those dark places that tend to define and kind of shape some of who we are at times. And that's one of the things that he said that I wrote down here. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, like, this is the thing that happened to you, but it's not what defines you. That's what happened to you. And that's what you have to know. You have to know what happened to you, but it's not who you are. It's not who you are at all. I want to jump into this other one really quickly because it gives a different perspective. And I may kind of, well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not going to say I'm going to fast forward it. She said, no, not a slacker. I'm a slacker. When I watch you, I'm like, whoo-wee. You shared your story many times. I get it, but I'm just telling you, there are going to come points and platforms and places and all of that you're going to get to share it on a greater platform, because people need to continue to hear it and from a different place. This gentleman is going to talk about some of the other stuff we get into, like forgiveness and all of that. So that's where I want to go. I'm going to
This is the story of my life falling apart, my journey in putting it back together, and my attempt to use my story to change the way we approach the topic. There's no nice way to put this, but about 2 years ago, I was raped. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I found myself walking the streets of Kingston in a part of the city I had never seen before. I was lost, I couldn't reach my friends, and no cabs were answering. I was alone, and I felt numb. After walking for over an hour, my phone rang, and it was a friend. They asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. This paralyzing mental numbness that would come to control my life for the next 2 years wouldn't let me, so I instead replied with a vague indication that my night hadn't gone as planned. With that said, my friend likely thought I was drunk and suggested I get to bed. Eventually, I arrived home just as the sun was coming up. I went to my bedroom and decided to get some sleep in the hopes that going to sleep would erase the night from my head. But when I closed my eyes, I realized these horrifying memories were not going away. This very bed became my safe space or my hideaway. It was removed from a reality that I still couldn't face. The bed remained my home as I tried to forget what had happened and as I experienced a new pain, a pain unlike any physical or mental pain I had experienced before. I cut myself off from the outside world. I stopped seeing friends and communicating with my loved ones. I became deeply apathetic towards everything in my life. School, friends, family, nothing mattered to me anymore. I stopped caring for myself in many ways. By the end of my second year, I had dropped about 50 pounds. I either found myself without an appetite or actually lacking any motivation to eat. But most of all, I had convinced myself that I didn't deserve food. How could I if I just lied in bed all day? Despite the fact my life was falling apart, the people around me didn't notice much of a difference. To an observer, my behavior actually wasn't that unusual. I think we all here know someone who might drink multiple times a week, or maybe they sleep too much, or maybe you know someone who's become apathetic and uncommitted. We often see these things as normal because they're such common coping behaviors of university students. My struggles were compounded by what felt like this constant and deep pressure looming over my head. This pressure was the result of an image I had of myself as a guy's guy, and the people around me had come to know me by this identity too. My years leading sports teams, competing in weightlifting, and working on an oil rig became these unique barriers to getting the help that, at this point, I desperately needed. We tend to think of men as both physically and emotionally strong. Physically strong enough to deter or resist an unwanted sexual advance, and emotionally strong enough to maintain composure even in the most damaging and hurtful of circumstances. If I wasn't strong enough to do either of these things, I questioned if I was the man I always thought I was. Instead of seeking help and support from my loved ones, I turned my back on them. I became angry, aggressive, and unreachable. Eventually, this new extreme behavior of mine no longer went unnoticed, and these very people began to push away. As the months passed, this numbness, anger, and deep depression that had come to take over my life slowly began to give way. I started to feel like myself again and began returning to the social circles I had previously abandoned. Although I was slowly but surely recovering, I still denied the event in my head and had actually, in this weird way, convinced myself the rape had never even happened. One night, about a year after the incident, I went out with friends, drinking more than I should have. I drank that night as a means of dissociating myself from the reality that I couldn't face. But on this night, I chose to do something I had long wanted to do, and I made my first call for help. I reached out to what was now my former partner of 4 years and told them, as the first person, that I had been raped. A short time later, I made my next call for help when I reached out to a counselor. This time, I attended the session after previously canceling, but I was unable to tell them exactly what had happened, so I left feeling unsatisfied, helpless, and just as desperate as before. My next attempt to call for help was when I considered pursuing legal action against the people who had raped me. I thought to myself, this could provide me with some closure or allow me to feel I'd finally done something to lift myself from the mess that was now my life. However, my mind quickly became clouded with the image of these people staring across from me in the courtroom, their word against mine. What if the judges and others thought I was lying? Why would I only bring something to court months after it had happened? I thought my image as a hyper-masculine male would surely fall apart as the people that knew me found out what had happened to me. And I questioned if I would be blamed for my own rape. Lastly, I considered the statistics. In Canada, roughly 1 out of 10 people that experience sexual assault will go on and report it to the police. Yet, out of every 10 that do report it to the police, only 2 will lead to a conviction. I thought, if a young woman is so often unable to convict their male abuser, that I would surely have no chance. It was pointless, the risks too high and the benefits just too low. Today, I stand in front of you as a survivor that is still trying to put together the pieces almost 2 months later. I've made strides in some areas, but I continue to face challenges in many others. After missteps with counseling and deciding not to pursue legal action against the people who had hurt me, I decided to try a new avenue, and I decided to try to share my experiences as an attempt to heal. The first step in this process was writing an article for a university paper on my campus. I thought it would allow me to share my story, hopefully support other survivors, and use it as an opportunity to advocate for better resources for people like me on my campus. The article received an overwhelmingly positive response. It showed to me there was a community that wanted to support me that I didn't know existed before, and that people's perceptions of me would not be changed as a male survivor. I also learned that my story resonated with other survivors and that people who hadn't experienced sexual assault were better able to understand and empathize with people like me. While many survivors or people who experience traumatic events may not find publicly sharing or discussing their experiences as the best way to heal, for me, this was a key step in my healing. In fact, recently my life has brightened. I found medication which works for me. I found friends who make me feel loved and supported. And I have begun to actually enjoy spending time with all my loved ones and friends once again. And perhaps most importantly, I'm excited about what the future holds, and I feel confident I can and will make the most out of it. Sitting here today, you might rightfully expect me to view the people who raped me as sick, twisted individuals, undeserving of forgiveness. And for a long time, I viewed them exactly that way. But today, my view has come to evolve and change as I came to realize holding on to these deep negative feelings towards them was not allowing me to grow and heal. For this reason, I've had to come to a certain level of forgiveness so that I could carry on and heal. This is why I'm on stage today, as a victim to try to provide insight into how we can move forward, both as individuals who have experienced sexual assault and as the greater society that should be supporting them. You may wonder why exactly I decided to share with you my story of sexual assault. I refused help because I believed men had to be independent. I told no one about my rape because I knew my emotions would come out, and I didn't believe real men showed their emotions. I couldn't face the outside society or world anymore because I was no longer the person I thought I was. I allowed my body to decay because I could not admit, even to myself, that this strong body I'd built up had not even been strong enough to protect myself. My relationship crumbled as I was unable to tell my girlfriend that I had been raped because I believed it would change her perception of me as a man. What I've come to understand is that there is no one identity of a man, and there's no necessity for one person's type of masculinity to be the same as another's. From a young age, men are taught to man up in times of crisis or pain, to use physicality to show dominance, to never be emasculated, and to not show their emotions. A study from the University of California, Berkeley, discovered that when men had their masculinity questioned or challenged, they were more likely to immediately become more aggressive and hold homophobic beliefs and attitudes. This study indicated an overarching issue with the male psyche today. Many men struggle with what their identity is and thus rely on these outdated ideas of masculinity, whether that be having to be stronger than their friends, being able to drink more, being able to sleep with more women, or being able to not cry. The notion that we should reject more fluid gender roles because they conflict with masculinity is fundamentally misguided. As I've sought to learn more about what makes me a man, I've learned how gender equity and a liberation from traditional gender roles can release men from the constraints of masculinity. Challenging one's own identity or one's own masculinity means stripping it down and from there rebuilding it in a healthy, productive way. You can be a man who cries. You can be a man who has never played a sport in your life. You can even be a man who has been raped. When I challenged this identity and the norms that I had been taught, it was only then that I began to heal. Recently, I've been able to begin reconstructing my own identity, this time not basing it on these traditional masculine traits, but rather on ones that I believe make my own identity as a man. These now include confidence, passion, honesty, loyalty, kindness, and perseverance. Let's work harder to understand how societal norms, like conventional notions of masculinity, can prevent survivors from seeking help. Once we've understood these issues, let's work together to challenge them as the dominant ways of thinking so that we can realize a society that doesn't impose pressures on its most vulnerable, but instead builds them up. Today, I ask you to join me in reshaping the way we approach sexual violence against any and all genders, and to challenge your own notions of masculinity. To do this, we must consider how we interact with the men in our lives. Through making these small changes, in the way we interact with the men in our lives, we can begin to shape a new society, one in which no one is left putting together their own pieces. To do this, we must resist using phrases like man up and be a man when the men in our lives show vulnerability, and instead tell our sons, brothers, and boyfriends that showing their emotions is healthy, that sensitivity is strength, and vulnerability is power. Thank you.
Okay. I know that one was a little longer. I kept going, Varg, do we cut it off? What do we do? But he had some good stuff at the end that I really wanted you to hear. Tell me what you thought about it. I got some points here. I'm going to go with the first one. Mr. Barton is folding clothes, and
Oh, they can hear that?
Yes, they can hear that.
This is a sensitive
Get him, y'all. I'm telling you, he just has no clue. But this is the first thing I'm going to say. I have always hated the term man up. Always. I never really understood why till I heard him say that. I've always hated that term. It gives this impression that you can't be sensitive, that you can't be have emotions, man up. Like when they say it, it's this beating of the chest, right? It's this weird moment. And I'm like, that's just not it. Like I don't even need to have other phrases. That's just not it to tell a man to man up. Number one, what does that mean? It goes back into you tend to tell men what men aren't than men are. And then there were some key points that he talked about here that I want to bring up. He became angry, aggressive, and unreachable. As individuals who interact with people on a regular basis, our family members, our friends, our coworkers, are we paying attention to the signs that men are giving us when they're having struggles or challenges in life? Are we there to support them the way that we would support our homegirl? Are we there? Do we recognize that aggression, that over-sexuality that he has, all of these things could be a sign of something else, but we've ignored it because he's a man. He's supposed to man up, or that's just what men do, right? We have these really weird narratives about who men are when it comes to outside of our landscape. But then when we want to date them, when we want to marry them, when they're our sons, we expect something different. And we expect something different from society when gazing at our husbands, our brothers, our loved ones, our friends. And how crazy is that when we don't do the same for those who are outside of our inner circle? I see the thumbs up from Dwayne. Becca says, I feel the same way when I hear someone tell a kid they're the man of the house. Oh, Becca, you got to go listen to my podcast. I'll talk about that. I don't think I've really shared that on here, but I have a new podcast. It is on Apple Music too. I'm all excited. But I have one called The Soul of a Fatherless Man. And that's exactly the topic I'm referring to in that particular podcast. I even kind of venture out into the conversation of maybe it's not that men don't want to be responsible. Maybe they've just been responsible to the wrong woman for a very long time. And so dating and being responsible is not even something they're interested in. They've been the man of the house since they were 12. They've been catering to their mother's emotions since then. So anyway, that's a whole different topic. Rebecca, go listen to that. I listened to it again and I'm like, girl, you own to something. And I know that was a download. The other thing was when I'm talking about supporting individuals outside of our inner circle, and are we even paying attention to those in the inner circle? Oh, look, my husband he put the link up there. The people pushed him away. As he pushed away, they were like, we ain't got time for that. They never really looked in. And if they did, it was only for it was only a little bit, right? It was only Like maybe they did. Maybe they were like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? And you know how men are, I'm fine. And so we don't dig any deeper. But men need to be heard beyond what they speak out of their mouths. You need to watch their body language. You need to watch their habits and the things that they're doing. Like this young man is saying that he's becoming more aggressive. He's getting, he's having more issues of anger. He's unreachable. And then he's even struggling in his relationships because of his sexual trauma. I love the fact that this man really delved into how much pain and how much struggle he had. A relationship he was in for 4 years, I think he said. It went down the tubes because he was challenged and he was struggling with this. That could have been a relationship that he was in with you guys, one of you. Have you ever dated a man who was sexually abused and you didn't know, or who had sexual trauma and you didn't know it, and you just thought, this nutcase, right? This dude right here won't do this and that, and he won't, and he's always, it makes you think. It made me think listening to these as I prepared. The other part, the legal action. You could tell he was still new, right? Let me bring that up. You could tell, he said it had been 2 years. 2 years since he had been assaulted. 2 years. And he's up there talking. And in the midst of sharing, I don't know how many people who would be able to share that in 2 years. That's a short period of time. I want some of you, those of you who are still on here, I want you to chime in and tell and put how many years has it been since your sexual assault? It's like we're going to put a death on this thing. We're going to put a...
While they're doing that, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does anyone know of anyone, a male that's been, and how are their mannerisms and
okay. So Vark wants to know, do you guys know any men or men in your life, in your inner circle, or who've been around you who have been sexually assaulted? Do any of you know that? And I'm going to say my sexual abuse was, Jesus, 34 years ago. Can you imagine? Still holding on 34 years later. 34 years later. Jesus. See, that brings it, and not holding on to all of it, just there's parts of it, right? The issue that I told you I had with my mother. Still holding on to that. And some of you are still holding on to that part. Mine is 34 years ago. 34 years ago. Typing that made my brain go, what the heck? Becca said 21 years ago. Like, this has an impact on my relationship with my mother. And I said on that first, live that I did, 3 decades. I knew it was 3 decades, but to type it out, to say 34 years ago, it's like, child, this is ridiculous. Taking legal action. 2 months after, taking legal action, sitting in front of people, determining whether or not someone's going to make this person pay or do some time for the crime they've committed. Tough move. I remember having that opportunity in front of me, and it didn't feel favorable, so I walked away. Same thing he did. We have to figure out how to make this more favorable for individuals who are going through this challenge, not those who keep wanting some attention, but those who are actually going through or who have been sexually traumatized, and how do they get vindication through the legal system? Because that's a good question. Vark was like, maybe you should do, I'm not going to keep this going till June. I'm just not, or through June. We got something else in June. How do you gain closure? That was something he talked about. What does closure look like to you? Can somebody chime in on that for me? What does closure look like to you? And as you're sharing that, I wrote down real toxic masculinity, because I call it real, because some of this toxic stuff people call toxic masculinity ain't. Real toxic masculinity is killing the men in our lives. Truly. You can't feel. You can't cry. You can't share. You can't be vulnerable. You can't be any of this. You can't be human? but then we need him to show up a certain way. What does closure look like? That's the question I want someone to answer here. What does closure look like to you? The other thing that really jumped out at me, he said, you know, he had challenges because he had built up this image, right? This he was masculine. He had the physique, right? He was built a certain way. And I forgot the word he used. See, it's escaping me. But he was talking about protection, and I immediately heard him really say, although he didn't say it, how do I protect someone in a relationship when I can't even protect myself? Like how? How do you do that? And maybe you guys aren't chiming in because you don't know what closure looks like. I believe we tapped into it last week, looking at the people, and even my quote on the Dr. Tori J page today is, it's time to ask the right people the hard questions. And my caption read that there are some people you've got to go back to and ask the hard questions concerning your life, who it may not be easy to do that, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's not going to be easy because they're the one who actually created the trauma. And how do you go about closure with the people who created the trauma? We really tapped into this last week. And what you do is the question that my mother's asking me. What do you want from me? What does it look like specifically? What do you have to say to this person or what instructions do you give this person, specific instructions on what they need to say to you in order for this to all go away? And I'm still crafting that question or that narrative to give to her so that I can let fully go of what happened 34 years ago. And I'm chuckling because that's just great. 34 years ago. Good God. Good God. That's a long time ago. That is a long time ago. So I think that's the closure that many of you are looking for, that you can't quite grab onto, and it gets really close. And I know this for a fact. The closure gets so close you can almost grab it. And then in that moment, the person doesn't say exactly what you need them to say. And so then you're back into a cycle of brokenness. And so there's no point in reaching back out again. And then somehow you guys get reconnected again, or you never lose connection, but then it comes up in conversation again. And you're looking for them to say it. I think the best way to go about this, and I'm going to say it, you have to be able to tell them specifically what you need, but that means that you have to spend time with yourself. I'm doing a lot of meditating right now where I'm just quiet so that I can hear myself and what I need. What does that 12-year-old girl need her mother to say to her? What does the 12-year-old need her mother to say to her so that she can move on? Nydia says, I think to be able to talk about it without breaking down anymore. I've forgiven him and my mother. Ultimately, I asked him when I was 12, why he did what he did when he had 3 daughters of his own. He had no answer. Yep. And Nydia, the fact that you've forgiven both of them is further than some of us are. I've forgiven my mother for aspects of it, but I clearly am still holding on to a piece of this. And the fact that she's open to me telling her what it is that I need to hear from her, and me even just closing. See, that's sometimes you just gotta stop and listen. And I immediately heard, what does the 12-year-old need her mother to say to her? Right? Period. I think no longer being controlled by the anger and the hatred of towards my attacker's message. That's your closure. Because the truth of the matter is not being controlled by this whole thing is what is important. That's what I have written down here. You must take control of your own narrative. Period. As people are trying to narrate your story for you. and tell you what it's going to be. Oh, you're not going to have a good relationship. Oh, this is what you're going to be. You're not going to be successful. Even looking at fatherlessness. Some of us can simply say, and that's why it's fatherless and sexual abuse, because the truth of the matter is, some of us have even felt if our fathers were present, this wouldn't have even happened to us. If our fathers were there to protect us, we would have never experienced this, because our big bad father would have kicked his butt. That's a narrative that we've given it. How do you deal with that? How do you grow from knowing that your father wasn't present, and maybe, just maybe, if he had been, this wouldn't happen to you? I have a friend, I'll say a former friend, let me call it that way. People, when you get married, you kind of, but a lot of his talk about masculinity lately has been surrounding an infidelity issue that he's had as a pastor. And in having that issue, he continues to bring up his fatherlessness and how he was literally sexually abused in the front lawn of one of the houses that they lived in. And it was shortly after his father left. It was shortly after all of that took place. And in his mind, as a man, don't we wish we could have that conversation on here? I just remember that one. That would be a good one, to be able to have him on here, but who knows? But him going through that and then dealing with his idea of what manhood happened to be, it had been a real struggle, a real struggle. But he looks at it as a lot of this took place when his father left, and the fatherlessness played a huge role in his sexual trauma. Becca says, mainly my mother. I think I've forgiven the others. I have not forgiven her. Yeah. And you said, I wonder that. Yeah. Like, what can be said, Becca? What do you write down? Because I know you're not contacting her. I know to exclude you from that contact list from here on out. What do you say? How do you navigate that for your own closure, full closure, not these bits and pieces that we've all experienced? What do we say? And I think that's something that we should all spend some time. I'll put a journaling thing up. I haven't done that in a while. What would you have your parents say to the little girl in you, the little boy in you? What would you have your parents say? Becca says, oh my God, I just realized I view my sister as one of my attackers because she didn't believe me and instead sided with our mother. Wow, Becca. That's, you just had an aha moment. And do you talk with your sister? Is your sister someone who you're still in relationship with? Let me say. Huh? What were you going to say about it?
Nothing.
He was.
I don't need to say that.
Okay. It's the pain that continues no matter how long you've been out of this. And I'm grateful that even I got a part of what I needed. What do I need my mother to tell the 12-year-old little girl that's still in there hurting? Although I'm way past that, clearly. What do I need her to tell? Not me, 46-year-old Tori, but the 12-year-old Tori. That's what I've got to answer. Now, I haven't spoken. No, she said, no, I haven't spoken to my sister in 3 years. Okay. She said, now that you say all of that, I need to write a little Nydia a letter and mother her the way I mother my mother now. Wow. Yeah, that's what hit me. I'm sorry, you guys. It was like, and I'm not sorry, but I'm telling you what I felt, because it's not about, this is what we're going to leave this with. It's not about talking to the adult you right now. That's not who this parent needs to talk to. The parent needs to talk to the 12-year-old or the 15-year-old or whatever age you were at the time you. That's where the closure comes. That's the closure. My husband is over here. He's making all these noises. I'm hoping that means that was good. Was that good?
Oh yeah, that was good. But I'm just, and I can't say it, but
don't say it then. I know to filter him.
I'm gonna have to say it.
You do?
I do.
No.
Okay.
I don't trust it. I don't. Oh, this is good. It's great. I get angry because I find myself talking to the little girl in my mom when I need to do the same for me. Message. Look, if I had a microphone, mic drop. No, Nydia, we're not going to let him say it. We're not. If it's important, I'll type it in there, but no.
I'll say it if they want to hear it, but
hold on. I'm done with you. No, he does not need to say that, y'all. No, I had him say it to me first, Nydia. He does not. I'll put you on mute. No.
And it helps you in the healing process.
Who are you going to do that to? Yeah, no.
Attackers.
No.
Accomplices.
How do... No. The message for tonight is we have to talk to the little girl in us or the little boy in us. Oh yeah, Nitty said she gave that look. No. No. We're going to stay whole and moving towards our complete and total healing in this. God will create that aspect of it, like we talked about in the second Facebook Live. God ain't busy. All right. He's acting like Medea over here, Nydia, if you know what we're getting to. He over here being Medea. God take too long, so he wants somebody to get God. That's basically where he went.
Maybe that's just the father in me. Who knows?
That may be the father in you.
That's the first thing I'm going to do.
We know.
We
know.
We'll talk about the rest of that later, but I got something to do right now.
Okay, wait a minute. Nydia said, how most of us fatherless children are codependent, so we tend to believe that we are loved when we are needed. Man. Girlfriend, that's a whole nother Facebook series in its own right. The people pleasing, the codependency. I remember being a child, and although my mother grew up in a two-parent home, she had a true codependency because of the trauma she experienced from her mother. And I can take you to the street, to the Elks building or whatever that building was, and I can tell you 1000% we would sit in the car and do our homework while my mother was in her Al-Anon meeting. So trust me, I know. Becca said, I didn't get what I needed when I was 5, so I've got to go back. I've got to go back and show her love, compassion, understanding, and support. So yours is a 5-year-old. I got you. How are you going to help someone when you won't help yourself? But it's not easy. We were taught to take care of others. Nydia, you are what Becca talked about. You got to be the man of the house or the woman in the house, right? You got to take on that whole identity. And because of that, you got to go hear the podcast. I even said that it has aspects of the female, right? Because we talked about this during the gender confusion and identity. It's masculine and feminine energy. It's not always just male and female in a household. And some of us, that's why we have the masculine energy the way that we do, because we became the man in our mother's lives. We became the man of the house, although we were the daughter. David says, there is a program called Reclaim Global that has helped over 400 women and men regain the little boy and girl in them. Some have had their first 2 children by their Some had their first 2 children by their father and so much more. Oh, wow. Yeah, see, that's a whole look at my husband's face. Yeah. Because you guys, I had a person call me one time and she was trying to figure out what to do in her relationship because y'all ready? Her father was molesting her from the age of 15 well into her 20s. And one day her boyfriend came to pick her up. Was it her boyfriend or her husband?
Boyfriend.
Her boyfriend came to pick her up from her parents' house and he saw them through the window having sex. Her having sex with her father. She was in her mid-20s. And for him, it was a choice and he couldn't understand. So that was like.
Well, didn't she try to justify it?
Yeah, she did.
So
because I think it had been going on for 8 years at that point.
That's relationship.
Yeah, and Varg, he doesn't have compassion for that. So of course he called it a relationship. But imagine the manipulation that started very early before he actually even penetrated her. So David, I totally know what you're talking about because I have received calls like that. Becca said, Nydia Cruz, we're doing things right. We're doing things right. I got you. My sister became the people pleaser. And Nydia said, I've become both. Yeah, Becca. Oh my God. Yeah. So I know what David's talking about. I know what he's talking about. And the boyfriend needed to get a DNA test because he wasn't sure if the children were his. That was the other part of that conversation. Yeah, I get some crazy calls and people always try to say, oh, I know my mom, my situation is crazy. Child, you just have somebody keeping you away from the child or you want to, reunite with a child you haven't seen in a while. That's not crazy. I've heard crazy. So, but I want to go back to this and end this live tonight because we could get into many conversations. We're all going to spend this week talking to the little boy and girl within us. We're going to love on her. We're going to care for her. We're going to put her emotions first and her needs first this week. And we're going to journal that. So I'll create that tonight and put it in there by the time you wake up in the morning. Where you can see it and just journal, write down whatever she needs to hear. What do you need someone to say to her? Whether it's your mother, your sister, your father, what do you need that person to say? And I'll go look up Reclaim Global to see who they are, just so we can have that. But I need you guys to know that that's the important part. Men need to be heard too is our topic, but we definitely got into men need to be heard, but they need to be the little boy in them that's experienced this. The man in them that's experienced this, they need to be heard. And so as we look at all of how we've all journeyed through this, I want to tell you next week, we're going to talk about sex trafficking. I told you guys because the person was on my Instagram a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault from the perspective of sex trafficking and our parents being the ones who put us into this. And there's some things going on, you guys, and we're going to heal. We're going to heal from this. And I want you guys to know. And then the following week, that's when we're going to have social worker and professor, what is her name? Margot Thompson. She's out of Canada. She's going to tell us if this happens to our children or someone's watching, how do you handle this? Because that's the biggest issue so many of us have had. So those are my lineups for the next 2 weeks. I hope the videos helped you because I couldn't find a man who would tell you the whole story. So I found them in a different kind of way. I hope it was something. Yes, Becca, not only need to hear, but they be believed. That's the other part. I need to hear, I believe you. Come on. Woo! I'm done tonight. Like, that's what you need to hear. And so how are you going to formulate that conversation in a letter to the little girl in you? Didn't matter if your mother believed her or not. It's the fact that you believed you. That's what that's where you need to sit. Trust me. Vark knows. Can I give y'all a little tidbit? I'm called a liar a lot. And it's my trigger. And I can recognize crazy people pretty quickly because I've had a lot of crazy people in my life. And I allowed them very much so, how we've talked about tonight, being a people pleaser, and allowed them to stay longer than they should have stayed. And so when I cut someone off, they try to create a whole fiasco. And so I got a text last night from someone who said, oh my God, what you said about this person was true. Mind you, this has been like 2 years ago. It created a whole issue at church. It created a whole issue with a group of people. I stopped teaching at the Bible school because of it. And now everybody's like, oh my God, what you said was right. Child, let me tell you something. We all need to hear, I believe you at some point in time. At some point in time. And that was, and it will happen. It will circle back up. It may not have happened yet, my love. But just like it happened for me last night, and I'm saying this in every bit of, your mama knew that happened to you, love. Maybe something was going on with her. Maybe it happened to her. There's something bigger going on in all of our equations that we have yet to look at. We have yet to fully look at them. And once we look at them, the full thing can be divulged and revealed in a way like that text message I received last night. And I looked at Vark and I was like, because ain't nobody at church gonna know, ain't nobody. But for me, I won't lie to you. It was one of them moments. Because I trust my instincts. I trust what I know about people. So we're going to end it tonight. I can't wait to see you next week. We're going to talk about sex trafficking and sexual abuse. I'm sticking on this and I'm peeling this off. And by the time the DFACS girl comes on and social worker, because she's a social worker, DFACS director or personnel or whatever, and then she's a professor on this topic in Canada. So we're going to pull the lid completely off at that point, and that's going to give you everything, all the tools you need as an individual. Maybe it'll give us what we need to know about how we should tell our parents what we need them to do. Maybe that's the last thing. And if this ever happens, God forbid, to your children, you'll know how to handle it. So I'm Dr. Tori J. I pray that this blessed you tonight. It blessed me because I'm going to go now and talk to the 12-year-old girl in me while you guys go talk to the little girl and little boys in yourself. You guys have an amazing night, and I'll see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.